Good morning, this is Mrs. Perez and I will be doing today's lesson for Tuesday, March 31st. So this week we will be learning about main idea. The main idea is very important because it helps us to better understand stories that we are reading. Story like if you're reading a book or reading passages. So let's review what main idea is. So for us to find the main idea before we read a book, you can always look at the title. You're going to ask yourself, what is this text about? And what is the topic? During the reading, while you're reading your book or reading your passage, you're going to look for and carefully read text features. You're going to ask yourself, is this text fiction or is it nonfiction? And look for information, words, and pictures that are repeated in the story or in your book. After you read your book or your story, think about the most important part or point of the book or the topic. What details or examples back up and support the main idea? So let's look here. When we're trying to find the main idea or topic of a story, we're going to start by thinking about what the text is mostly about. So after you read your book, or even before you read the book, you're looking at the title. Let's say the title of the book is Giraffes. That gives you an idea of what you're going to be reading about. As you're reading, you're going to be looking for key details that support what your main idea is. Look for your key details. Your key details will be found in your informational text. Informational texts are usually your nonfiction stories. And how to find it. How do you find the main idea? As I previously said, you can always look at the title of your book or your passage. Look at the pictures. You get a lot of clues from the pictures in your book or your passage. And this is a little good clue right here. You can always reread the first and the last sentences in your passage. A lot of the times your main idea or main topic will be located in those parts of your passage. So these are the steps that you can follow to help you find your main idea or your main point. Okay, so for today's activity in your booklet, you're going to see a story called Capybaras. We're going to read it together, and then we're going to see if we can find what the main idea is about, and then we're going to answer the questions as well. All right, capybaras. Not all rodents are small like rats and mice. Capybaras are much bigger. The capybara is the biggest rodent on Earth. A capybara is about the size of a large dog. Capybaras live in South America. Capybaras spend most of their time in the water. The water keeps them cool. They also eat plants that grow in the water. A capybara can stay underwater for 5 minutes. Okay, so that's our story. Now remember what we talked about. You can get a clue as to the main idea or the main topic by looking first of all at your title. This is the title of my story, Capybaras, and that of course gave me an idea of what this little story that I was going to read would be all about. Now I can also use context clues, text features, and the pictures to help me understand what I'm reading. Now look at the directions here. Color the text to show how you know. Question number 1, what is a rodent? Now, if you go back to the passage, you'll see that one of our text features is a bolded word. Always look for those bolded words because those are going to be very important parts of your story. So, we're going to read paragraph 1. We are going to need our green crayon. Let's see if we can find out what a rodent is. Not all rodents are small like rats and mice. It is in the first sentence. I'm going to underline. This is using my text evidence to help me find the answer. Okay, so letter A kind of dog. As I read that sentence that I underlined, I really don't see anything about of it being a dog, so I know it can be A, so I'm going to cross that one out. Letter B, a kind of animal that is usually small. That might be my possible answer. I'm going to put a little question mark there. And letter C, a place in South America. Okay, so as I read paragraph 1 and I read that sentence that I underlined using my text evidence, there was no mention of letter C either, so I know that C cannot be the answer. And the only possible answer would be B, a kind of animal that is usually small. A kind of animal that is usually small that would define what rodents are. So I used my text clues or my context clues to help me get the information or the answer that I needed for number 1. Number 2, what are 2 reasons that capybaras spend so much time in the water? That can be actually found in paragraph 2. I can go back and reread the passage. And when I read this part right here, the water keeps them cool. And actually, I'm going to need blue for that. So I'm going to underline where I found the answer. The water keeps them cool. They also eat plants that grow in the water. Okay, so these are the 2 reasons that capybaras spend so much time in the water. So I can write each of those for number 1 and for number 2. Now, going to number 3, what is one thing that you can learn from the picture that you can't learn from the text? So now I'm going to use this text feature of using the picture in my story to help me gather more information. So by looking at the picture, for example, I can tell that capybaras have no tails, right? No tails. So I can write that down. Capybaras have no tails. I also can look at their feet. It looks like their feet are webbed. So that's another clue that I can get about the picture. It's information that I'm gathering from this picture that was not any part of the text that I read. So you can also gather lots of clues from the pictures in your story. Now, by reading all of this, I have learned that the main idea of this story, Capybaras, is about this animal and the capybaras, and it's giving me information about what they are and what they eat. Okay? All right, so we're going to move on now to our next lesson, which is going to be our writing lesson. For today, boys and girls, if you look at the top of this paper, it does say Tuesday and Thursday. So we're going to be using these story starters to help us get going on our story writing for today, Tuesday, and also Thursday. Let's look at some of your topics that you can choose from. What would you do if you were a leprechaun? That sounds pretty interesting to write about. What would you do? What would you see? That would be fun to write about. What would you do if you found a buried treasure in your backyard? Another really cool, interesting thing you can write about. Here's another one. What is your favorite Dr. Seuss book and why? For example, my favorite book is The Cat in the Hat. So I can maybe write about why that's my favorite book. And here's another topic. Make a list of animals you would like to see at the zoo. That sounds like a fun one too. Okay, so we are going to need you to pick one of these ideas that you can write about. Now let's go over what we do when we're writing a personal narrative. First of all, you want to focus on the small moment. That means whatever your topic is, we want to make sure we stick to that topic. So for example, if I'm going to write about leprechauns, I want to make sure that my entire story is about leprechauns. Okay? We don't want to shift to something else that has nothing to do with that. So make sure that we focus on our moment of what we're writing about. Beginning, middle, and end. Of course, when we're story writing, we want to make sure we have a good beginning, middle, and end. Okay? You can have your characters, your setting being described in the beginning, events that happen in the story could be the middle part of your story, and of course, you want to have a conclusion or how's your story going to end. And then we're going to also include in our writing, we can describe people, places, or things, and use your senses when you're trying to do that. You can use senses like what you would see or smell or feel or hear. This would be a good time to also think about how you can add adjectives or maybe adverbs to your sentences. It makes them a lot better and more descriptive in your writing. Tell how you feel. For example, if I'm writing about the leprechauns, did I feel happy or excited that I saw a leprechaun? How would you feel about your topic? And if I know some of us like to use dialogue. If you're using dialogue, that means that you're actually writing down what people are saying, what your characters are saying. And don't forget, we've talked about using quotation marks when you are using dialogue. And this is what the paper will look like when you start writing your story. Make sure that you write with your best neatest handwriting. You also have a little space up there where you can draw your picture and you can color it. That would be fun also. So when you're done writing, boys and girls, let's go over what we're going to do after we're done writing so we can check our story and make sure that we're doing the best possible writing we can. We're going to check for capital letters. This is your little checklist. Did you use capital letters? If you did, you can check it off and say yes. Did you use punctuation? Did you leave finger spaces between your words? That's very important. And does your story make sense? Does it flow well from beginning to end? Okay, so that's called editing. You're going to go back and edit your writing and make sure that it's your best job. Okay, so that is what we're doing for our ELA lesson for today. And now we're going to shift over to what we're going to do for math. Okay, so for math this week, we're going to be focusing on measurement. Okay, in your packet, you have a little picture of a ruler that you may want to cut out to use later on. Some of you may have rulers at home, and if you have these, you can use them as well. Okay, so we'll talk about this in just a little bit. Let's get started with our sticky math. Now here, we're going to be reviewing our subtraction facts. We want to make sure that we can start learning these by memory. That's the whole point of using sticky math. It's helping with your automaticity to make sure you know your subtraction your facts, so you can time yourself. That would be a good idea to time yourself. There are 48 here, so I would maybe give myself 5 minutes and see how much you can do in 5 minutes. So you can have someone time you and see how well you do. Okay, so keep practicing those subtraction facts. Now, since we are going to do measurement today, I know that all of us have seen these before, and yes, they're rulers. We use these to measure things. But what happens if you don't have a ruler? You can actually use what we call non-standard units of measurement to measure different objects. So, for example, if I want to measure this pen right here, okay? If I want to measure the pen, I can use linking cubes to measure the length of my pen. And remember, whenever you're measuring, whether it's linking cubes or anything else, make sure you always have a starting point and your ending point. Also, when you are connecting our linking cubes here, we want to make sure that we are not leaving any gaps or spaces between our units of measurement. They have to be as close together as possible with no gaps. Okay, so I'm just connecting them here. Okay, so I can tell that by using my linking cubes that this pen is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is about 7 unit fixed cubes long. Remember, from the starting point to the ending point with no gaps. Okay. Now I can take the same pen and I can measure it with something different. How about paper clips? You can also use paper clips. Same concept, from your starting point to your ending point. 1, 2, no gaps. 3, 4, 5. I would say that this pen is about 5 paper clips long. Okay, now something I did want to mention, boys and girls, is that your measurement will also vary by what you're using to measure. Now, if I want to use pinto beans, notice that the pinto beans are units that are smaller than the clips, right? So we're going to come